In the year 1, the world was already dominated by two great superpowers: the Roman Empire in the west and the Han Empire in the east. But there was also an enormous diversity of other nations, tribes, and peoples. There are those that have disappeared without leaving a trace, and others that are still very much alive today. The Han dynasty had started in 202 BC and is considered a golden age in Chinese history and the foundation of Chinese culture. Since the reign of Emperor Wu from 141 to 87 BC, Confucianism was the official state ideology in education and court politics. But the influence of Taoism as a kind of counterbalancing force remained strong, while Buddhism was making inroads into China as well. In 9 AD though, the Han dynasty was briefly interrupted by Emperor Wang Mang's Xin dynasty. Born into one of his country's oldest noble families in about 45 BC, Wang Mang was a Confucianist scholar and politician who enjoyed popularity among the peasants. Between 2 and 5 AD, the Yellow River had changed its course, with devastating effects. Together with the civil wars and corruption of the imperial court, this led to discontent and unrest among the peasantry. In an intensive propaganda campaign, Wang Mang claimed that heaven was granting him the mandate for a new dynasty. He was already acting as regent for child Emperor Ru Ziying, but when the infant was only 4 years old, Wang Mang seized total control of the empire in a brutal coup. Another child emperor had gone before young Prince Ru Ziying. This was 11th Emperor Ping of Han, whose reign lasted from 1 AD to 6 AD. In that year, 14-year-old Ping was poisoned by Wang Mang. The Roman Empire was ruled by an emperor with a divine mandate as well, although in this case he was the first of a long list of rulers to come. As the heir to Julius Caesar, who had been assassinated in 44 BC, Emperor Augustus had begun his reign in 27 BC. By the year 1, Augustus had almost doubled the size of the empire, bringing Egypt, northern Spain, the Alps, and much of the Balkans under Roman control. But in 9 AD, the Romans suffered a military setback when 3 Roman legions were destroyed by a German army led by Hermann. The results of this battle in the Teutoburgerwald ensured the continued German independence from Rome. Another eternal adversary of the Roman Empire was the Parthian Empire, better known today by the names Persia or Iran. Further to the east laid the Indo-Greek kingdom, a legacy of the conquests of Alexander the Great in the 4th century BC. But it was now being replaced by the Indo-Scythians, a group of nomadic peoples of Scythian origin, who were migrating from Central Asia southward into northern and western India. There they met with sedentary farmers, which resulted in a constant war of competition. In human history, this has been a recurring struggle, already expressed in the ancient story of Cain and Abel. The Satavahana dynasty was one of several kingdoms that played an important role on the Indian subcontinent. Further to the east, in Southeast Asia, we see the rise of the Funan. This Hindu kingdom had trade relations with both India and China. Around the Pacific Ocean we find a diversity of civilizations, large and small as well. On the Korean peninsula, for instance, the period of the Three Kingdoms is beginning. And in Central America, several ancient civilizations have also developed their own fascinating cultures. Obviously, the beginning of the Western calendar is marked by the birth of Christ. This event could therefore be seen as the most defining moment of the first decade. Of course, no one had ever heard of Christianity at that point in time. Although Jerusalem was part of the Roman Empire, the Judaic traditions were alive and well. In 37 BC, the Second Temple had been completely restored and expanded by Herod the Great, the Jewish king. The period of the Second Temple began in the 5th century BC when Cyrus the Great freed the Jewish people from exile in Babylonia. Cyrus, who was the first Persian emperor, then also helped the Jews rebuild their temple, which had been destroyed by the Babylonians. The Persians themselves worshipped Ahura Mazda, or Lord of Wisdom. Their religion was named Zoroastrianism after its founder Zarathustra, and has been of great influence on a number of religious and philosophical belief systems. Some of its unique features are still familiar concepts today. Those include its monotheism, messianism, and belief in free will, as well as its dualistic cosmology of light versus darkness, angels versus demons, and heaven versus hell. By the first decade AD, though, the strongest cultural influence in the Middle East came from the Greeks. But of no less importance as a religious and philosophical center was India, where Buddhism and Hinduism continued to develop. New ideas and philosophies were forming as a result of cultural exchange and close trade relations. These blended with the ancient traditions, some of which are still honored today, such as animism, ancestor worship, and shamanism. In this view, Christianity arose from the cross-fertilization that took place between Western, Eastern, and Jewish traditions. The spread of knowledge and science through word and writing was stimulated by the relative security and stability of empires like China and Rome. These early forms of globalism created the need for an overarching narrative to replace the confusing patchwork of local gods and beliefs. For the time being, though, the reigns of Isis, Jupiter, Woden, and the like were still largely unchallenged. There had not yet been very much urbanization, and most people lived in rural areas. Estimates of the total world population range from about 200 to 300 million. At the start of the decade, as recorded in the tax census of 2 AD, the population of the Han Empire stood at 57 million. This put it ahead of the Roman Empire with around 44 million people. But while the Romans continued to grow at a steady pace, China's population declined sharply as natural disasters, famine, and war took their toll. The degree of literacy is deemed to be quite low, although scrolls of Egyptian papyrus had been written for thousands of years. But the possession of these works was mainly limited to the wealthy and well-educated elites. The centuries before had produced a host of scientists and engineers, including Socrates, Plato, and Confucius. Agricultural tools, weapons, and instruments had been manufactured from iron for centuries too, and this development continued. Particularly important for agriculture were the many innovations in water management, such as mills, pumps, aqueducts, and sanitation. The engineers in the fields of water management and architecture were extremely competent. And not just in the Roman Empire, these developments were boosting the economies of India, China, and Central America too. See you in the next decade.